Welcome to the Waggle Room. When honeybees return to the hive, they perform a waggle dance, not to give answers, but to share signals, direction, distance, quality and possibility. Many dances can happen at once, different options, different signals, all moving through the colony together. Over time, patterns form, attention shifts, some signals fade, others gather momentum, and a way forward begins to emerge. Humans do this too, in groups, communities, in moments of uncertainty, long before anything feels clear or settled. The Waggle Room is a space to notice those signals, explore the systems they sit within, and make sense of what's emerging. Signals, systems, sense-making. Welcome to the Waggle Room, everyone. Well, firstly, it's Valentine's Day, and I wouldn't want to spend Valentine's Day with anyone else apart from Nigel.
Wow.
Don't tell my wife that.
Yeah, I'm glad my office doors are closed.
And talk about scheduling. Me and Nigel have been trying to schedule this for a while, and he's a very, very busy guy. So we said we'll do it today. And England are playing, and I'm a massive England fan. So that's recording in the background. So that's cool. So before we get going, this is all about finding the signal. So in a beehive, nothing moves by accidents. Bees don't optimize for busyness, right? They optimize for survival. And they've got loads of different jobs that they do: foraging, nursing brood, cleaning, regulating temperature, whatever it is. And then they're trying to find new sites to swarm to. So the roles that they have in a colony shift all the time. And that system that they're in, that complex adaptive system, actually adapts, and they balance very well sort of exploitation of a source that they have found, but they then leave some bees to do the exploration. And they're doing this all the time. They converge on whatever signal is strong enough. Why do I tell you that? Well, that leads a lot into, I think, flow, which you can see from Nigel's jacket. We'll go into it a lot more detail, but this flow of energy information, how does it actually get throughout the colony? It's an interesting thing. And I think Nigel's probably got a very, very good perspective on this. I think somewhere along the way, we've probably ended up getting lost in keeping a lot of the tools that may have been useful, and we got lost in trying to think how we actually use them. So, Nigel, pleasure to have you as always. Any conversation, I'll hand over to you, mate.
I'm making furious notes. Yeah, just in case I'm looking down, I'm making notes because I'm like, what am I going to talk about? Damn it. Survival, swarms, shifting roles, complex adaptive. Anyway, it's good. And I've been following the stuff you've been doing around your beekeeping and your new fascination and hobby. Funny, my wife's fascinated with beekeeping because her grandpa used to keep bees, but because we live in suburbia, it's not, you have to live so far away from pesticides and farmland and all this sort of stuff to keep bees in America because of, contamination and that type of thing. And it's interesting because there's been lots of debates recently about, hexagons and honeycomb shapes and tessellation and things of that nature. So I'm sure there's lots of things we can talk about.
100%. We've had lots of contact. I'm going to say this now because this blew me away. I did a charity event some years ago, and I had sort of got to know Nigel. We've never met in person. It's always been online. And he made such a generous contribution to my charity. And I just want to say that publicly because it blew me away. So thanks, mate, for doing that. I really appreciated it.
Anytime. The stuff you've done and the stuff you've done with the kids at the school and everything else has been incredible. It's really good to watch and heartwarming. And maybe it's just me absolving my own guilt by helping others. Maybe there's some sort. I know there's some. I forget the word now. There's some word anyway. Whatever. But no, it's a pleasure, and it was a real good thing. And I remember talking to the kids at the school as well, and when we did a podcast with them. That was a lot of fun. It's heartwarming to see that at least the generations that are growing up are going to fix all the mess that we've made of things.
So do you want to give everyone a bit of a intro on your background?
Well, I mean, look, a bit of a antagonist, protagonist, I forget, a bit of both, I suppose. So I grew up in the world of project management and technology. I was in the electronics world and the electrical industry and early days of the computing industry and using devices nobody really cares about anymore now. I actually sold an acoustic coupler modem the other day on eBay. I had in a box that I'd had for donkey's years, and most people under the age of 30 will have no idea what that is. And then I wandered into this sort of, a lot of stuff happening between then. I ended up wandering into this Japanese automotive company. And for some reason they employed me, and for some reason I thought it was a good idea. And for the first year, I used to tell the story, I was resigning every day because I thought they were absolutely stark staring bonkers, because everything I'd learned in Prince 2 and PMP and all this stuff, they showed me was complete nonsense. And it truly is complete nonsense. And it took me about 7 or 8 months, and then one day it just clicked. And this was Toyota, of course. And I started to learn how they did things and how their concepts work. And they trained me for years and paid me while they were training me, which is fantastic. And then after that, I went on to do a lot of other things. And I've been very fortunate. I've met a lot of really cool people and worked with a lot of cool people in a lot of industries. And it's enabled me to learn. It's enabled me to share ideas and come up with some this thing, the flow system, with a couple of my colleagues and a lot of industry heavyweights who contributed knowledge and helped us along the way to try and make sense of the sort of things we're trying to achieve, as well as understand a little bit better human psychology, which is a never-ending battle. So now what I describe myself as, I don't know, I'm a problem solver, and probably that's it, really. I just like to solve problems. I go into organizations. I'm working with an organization as we record this out on the west coast of the US who are specifically manufacturing surveillance drones, and without giving too much away because of NDA and things, the knowledge I've gained over the years is helping me help them to do some pretty cool stuff on their production line. And so that's really what I do. I brought all this together, the knowledge of all these different things, from complexity, from team science, from distributed leadership, with my colleagues, John and Ponch. And we sort of brought this together into some books we thought helped to explain things. And now I go into organizations and try and help them solve different problems, everything from manufacturing to knowledge work to executive coaching. And I have a lot of opinions I share on LinkedIn, which are at times poking the bear, but hey.
I absolutely love that, watching the stuff you're doing on LinkedIn. The books Nigel's talking about are sat over there on my shelf, so we'll go into them in a bit more detail. But going back, because if anyone talks about anything to do with TPS or lean or anything in some sort of thing on LinkedIn, the thing I tend to do is ask you a question about it, or tag you in it, because at the end of the day, you've worked in it. And I really am interested in, why do people still misunderstand what goes on in Toyota?
One of the things that gets me, and I don't know what the phenomenon is about this, you find a lot of people who've never worked for Toyota rush to their defense and defend their honor to the death, but having no knowledge of actually ever working there, only acquired knowledge from, anecdotal and other people's articles. And really, and one of the things that always amuses me, and I have people who are senior Toyota folks who have still there or have left, and alumni like me. There's a big argument. Toyota never used the word lean. Well, in the UK, in Wales, they have the lean training centre. Toyota have a lean, it's part of their plant there. So it's things like that always amuse me, but I don't know why the people don't really understand it, or whether they've just never taken the time to learn. And the biggest misconception about lean thinking within Toyota, or let's call it TPS so we don't offend the purists out there, the biggest misconception is that Toyota is a collection of tools. And that's what people who've learned lean, so the Americanized version of TPS, they see lean as a collection of tools. But actually, it's all behaviors. It's attitude, it's discipline, it's behaviors, it's human factors. And the tools are really just techniques that have been learned, patterns if you prefer, that these things seem to work, so let's do these things. But it's constantly evolving. I mean, it's said that the Toyota production system was sort of developed from the 50s to the mid 70s. And that's sort of a fixed period. And that's in Toyota's own books. But of course, this thing is constantly evolving. The sort of whole ethos of Kaizen, this continuous improvement ethos, is ongoing. So nothing's ever really fixed. But really, my observations, it's all about behaviors, human factors, which of course, and of course, people have roles and people understand their place, but it probably links very easily to what you observe in the excuse me, in the natural world with beekeeping, because you have this system that involves humans in Toyota, which serves a complex adaptive system because we're not automatons, we're not predictable. But Toyota put a significant discipline into the way they do things. I'm talking about the production line now, not the crazy offices they're They look in America, the offices look like most other American corporations, suffer with a lot of the same problems. But when you're in the production facilities in the plants, it is a very highly disciplined environment. And so, but as I say, it's really down to attitudes and behaviors, because people who work in Toyota learn the Toyota way of doing things, learn what is okay, learn what's not okay. So we amplify the good, dampen the bad, or more like this, less like that, as our friend Dave Snowden would say. And people take that on. They become part of that, and their discipline becomes part of who they are, and it's just very, very successful. But then others take what they think they interpret and have learned in Toyota and try and apply a bunch of tools,
Yeah.
but they don't focus on the human factors, the interactions, the behaviors, the sort of team science stuff, and the distributed leadership stuff that we've written about. So that's my sort of take on it. Stop thinking about tools, focus on the human behaviors.
Yeah, it's made me think there. Maybe people focus on the tools because actually it's not that difficult, is it? It's not that difficult to talk about a tool. It's bloody hard to get people to work in a different way. You see all these things about, we're going to come in and we're going to do this behavior change program over 6 months and it's going to change the whole organization. And you just think it's probably not in 6 months, but it still gets sort of rolled out and people buy into it. And this is one of the things I've been discovering over these talks is all the stuff you're doing, all the stuff other people were interested in. You take this into organizations and people look at you as if you're the one that's peddling the pseudoscience, because actually the pseudoscience is so ingrained. That's the reality.
Collective mindsets. That's a great one to mention. There's no such thing as a collective mindset. You can't all have the same mindset. You can share a philosophy. You can align to a philosophy and move in that direction and do things that help you achieve the things that the philosophy proclaims or suggests or you align to, but you can't share the same mindset. And our mutual friend Delia McCabe has written a lot about this, about how that at the synaptic level, it's actually a physiological impossibility for you both to have the same mindset. And the Germans, and I'll mispronounce this, so apologies to any German speakers, Weltanschauung, which basically is your worldview. So our worldview is informed by our nature and our nurture and how we perceive things, our financial backgrounds, our education background. And so all the parts of how we've been nurtured and how we see our position in society and how we view our lot in our lives and informs our worldview. And you can't bring a bunch of people together and then they all have exactly the same worldview, which is this mindset sort of idea. But you can have people aligned to a shared and common goal, a direction of travel, a vector in complexity thinking. And that's basically what Toyota does. Toyota has a philosophy. You either believe it or you don't. And some people can't hack it. People come and they leave because it's not a philosophy they can align to. But the people who like the philosophy, espoused in the Toyota way and in other documents and things that have been written over time, the leaders they've had, choose to align to that, and they adapt behaviors that align, enable them to sort of move in that direction. And then the collective is aligning to that mission, that vision, that direction, and the things that we're trying to achieve. And they find ways to collaborate and work together. And then Toyota coach behaviors and provide ways of working that might be useful, which people view as tools that help them achieve that. But it does take discipline and it does take a willingness to listen and understand and adapt. And that's the biggest challenge. I mean, most organizations, harping on the lean stuff a bit, they go on Gemba walks. And it's a very commonly used phrase, go to Gemba. But most people do. So in Toyota, we taught this phrase, Genchi Genbutsu, which means, go to the source without assumption, understand the facts and take action. I'm paraphrasing. That's how my boss taught it me. But there's a very similar phrase in Japanese called Genchi Kenbutsu. So instead of G-E-N, K, and that's the Japanese terminology for sightseeing. So what a lot of leaders do, they go to the Gemba, which is the real place, the place where the work is being, the actual place where the work is being done, and they go sightseeing. They may tap somebody on the head and tell them well done and carry on, but they don't actually make the time to understand the problems that are occurring and actually take action. And by take action, I mean provide support. get involved, understand the problem. A lot of my work is making that type of stuff visible so that leaders will engage. And there's the phrase we often use is, do you manage from the boardroom or do you manage from the Gemba? And unfortunately, a lot of people manage from the boardroom. They don't manage from the Gemba. You endless meetings after meetings after meetings, dashboards about dashboards about dashboards, and bringing people together to do status meetings over issues and risks. Why aren't you actually where the issues and risks are occurring? Well, forget risks, as they haven't happened yet. They're just people guessing what might happen.
Yeah.
Where issues have occurred, why aren't you there where the issues are occurring, understanding why they're occurring, and figuring out collectively how to solve them, rather than just turning dashboards red and using red as a bad thing? And one of the things I teach a lot now, and it came out as a comment during a conference I was speaking on a panel, just as one of those things that my brain let come out my mouth. And then I realized it was a good thing, that red is not bad. Red means I need help. And actually, what I'm teaching companies now, including my current client, is that you need more red than you get green. Red helps us learn. With green, we learn nothing. Everybody thinks everything's great.
Yeah.
In project management terms, it's called green shifting. We just shift it until everything's green until it's not, and then that's too late to do anything about it. But what we want to see is lots of red, because every time we see red, we're able to adapt, we're able to learn, we're able to understand and help resolve things, put countermeasures in place. So the metaphorical and-on cord is basically pulling the cord to turn the light red, and we'll ignore the nuance of the yellow light in the middle just for this example. But essentially what we're trying to do is draw attention to discrepancy from standard or issues or problems or challenges so we can resolve them immediately. The whole concept of Jidoka, building in quality, not passing the defects down the line for somebody else to fix. But unfortunately, that's a behavioral thing. And a lot of organizations find it very difficult to adapt those or adopt those types of behaviors. And that's where my biggest challenge is, and why I think most of the time in most organizations, it's a lost cause.
We're talking about managing from the boardroom. I suppose, as you come down a level, it's almost like people managing from a PowerPoint deck as well, or the PowerPoint deck's been built, or we've got a stakeholder list on an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, I mean, great. When you're talking there, I had never come across these concepts until I started working in the oil and gas industry, and I worked in Shetland for about 4 years. And we did this, it was getting very, very difficult to get any work done. And they said, we need to find out what's going on. So they did a whole sort of Kaizen, and actually it wasn't what people thought it was. The problem was at the permit office. There weren't enough people issuing permits to sign them to say, yes, you can go and do the work on a hazardous environment. So it's the first time I sort of came across this. Even I was in the military, it's not called that, but you're always doing constant after action reviews. There's always debriefing. There's people are quite critical when they have to give feedback, but it's done for the correct reasons. I don't really see too much of the debriefing and feedback going on really in many organizations.
No, and I mean, I'm writing some of the words down like pre-mortems and red teaming and critical thinking, because that's all how we ensure the plan is a good plan before we execute the plan. Post-mortems and debriefs, all good, and plan, brief, execute, debrief, PBED, from the military point of view is all well and good. But the pre-mortem, the red teaming, the critical thinking is critical at the beginning, because it's all right debriefing in hindsight, but you can't fix it at that point if bad things have happened. And so what we really want is the organization enabling that critical thinking to occur at the point where the work is being done. And that's the distributed leadership element of here, is transferring the ownership of decision making, because we talk about accountability, and that really means the ownership of the decision. We are allowed to make the decision, and it will not be overruled or countermanded. So the Toyota philosophy, and the philosophy I use a lot especially when I'm working with the people who actually execute the work, is how do we give them the ownership of the decision making? How do we transfer to them the ability to make the right decisions? Because they tend to know more about what's happening than anybody else. And in poorly run companies and facilities, and I've been in a few, the people, and I often have a phrase, the people who are paid the less usually work the hardest. And so those people are usually the folks that are holding things together. They're the glue that holds the system together, and the system just wouldn't function without them. Yet the people up here who are paid a lot more, and they handle a lot of stress, granted, but they don't do the day-to-day work. They're making decisions without this knowledge. And it's closing that gap that's important. And it's not the odd PowerPoint deck and report or dashboard isn't useful. Of course, they're useful if they're visualized in the right way. And the most important is they are visible, not stuck in some consultant's laptop, but actually visible so they can be seen in real time and they're updated in real time. And then that informs decision making, or better, it informs curiosity so that you see something and you actually go see for yourself. That's the whole Genshi Genbutsu, or doing a Genshi, it's often called. Actually going and understanding without assumptions to get the facts, not data. Data lies, facts don't. Go and get the facts and understand from the source, that's the Gemba, where the work is being done so you can take action and help and support. But that's really how large organizations run.
So the leadership, obviously, there's good leaders, there's bad. The amount of money that gets spent on leadership training, if a lot of it was that good, there would be nothing going wrong. All these leaders would just be phenomenal. Where does the whole leadership thing actually become a constraint with getting stuff done?
So people pay me a lot of money to teach leaders. The problem
Yeah.
is very few of them actually listen, or they may listen, but they don't hear, or they just dismiss what I'm saying as
Yeah.
rhetoric or, nonsense. And unfortunately, so we have to define the word leader. So anybody can be a leader at any level of the organization. Leadership isn't a job title or a function. It's a set of characteristics. And you only become a leader if you have followers. People choose to follow you. There's lots of people in the world we follow who we don't pay any money to, and who they don't ask us to pay money to them, whether it's great religious leaders, great political leaders, just big people that we found that influence our beliefs and our understanding of things, and we choose to follow them. Hey, look how many followers you've got on LinkedIn. I got about 22,000. So I guess some people follow
Yeah.
me because they think I've got something worthwhile saying, or they just get amused by the nonsense I spout, one or the other. The greatest comedy act on LinkedIn. But the reality of it is, in an organization, there's a concept of followership. And people choose to follow somebody, and it's not about their power, their status, their wealth, or their income. It's about what they offer in the way of support, advice, counseling, mentorship, bunch of other things. And people choose to follow them. And so that we first of all have to understand what that means. Now, if we're talking about the executives with large pay packets and senior level roles in the hierarchy, it's more about management training and helping them to understand what becoming a leader is all about versus leadership training, because you can't train somebody to gather followers unless you're
Yeah.
Tony Robinson or somebody like that. But I mean, the thing is, or Robbins, whatever his name is. So the point is this, that I wish I could make his money doing leadership. So the reality of it is that we try and teach management, people in charge of something, how they can enable their organization to thrive, not just survive. And that's the whole nuance there. And we give them ideas. I give them some of my reflections of my time at Toyota and people who've taught me and mentored me over the years, and people who still do, and my experiences of actually going and doing the work. I'm one of these consultants who still do the day job. I'm not a
Yeah.
consultant just consulting. I actually go and work on. I'm back working on a line now, and
Yeah.
I'm actually doing it real hands-on, doing it day to day. And so if you're teaching leaders how to manage a company developing software, it might be a good idea that you're still writing software with the latest techniques and understanding the challenges that the poor sods are going through, not just vibe coding a demo or something. You might want to actually be an expert in the field in which you're advising leaders on their behaviours. And if you've never hired or fired people or run a company or had a large team working for you, then you don't really have the right to advise others how to do that. And people will argue, and I've had people argue on LinkedIn that, well, football coaches aren't great footballers, but they still coach football teams. Yeah, but they might know a little bit about the sport, and they may have played the game, and they may have been involved through the grassroots for many years. If you asked me to coach a football team, because, hey, I'm supposed to be a leadership coach, it would be a disastrous result. Don't get me anywhere near the English team. It would be disastrous. So that's a little bit about my feelings, is that you've got people who are managing things, but they aren't necessarily leaders, and they need to understand the nuance between the two. The other thing, and I joke about it on LinkedIn and other places, is from the 60s, the Peter Principle, which is, it's seen as a derogatory comment, and sometimes I use it as such. But essentially what that means is somebody who has been exceptionally good and successful in this role gets promoted to this role, which is now completely different to the job they did day to day. And it's known as being promoted to your level of incompetence. But what that means, and it sounds as a derogatory, but it means you've got this great expertise as an engineer, say, and now you've been put in charge of people management, but you've never done it. And you're hopeless, and you're not a good strategist. You can't design strategy and direction of travel for the organization, but you were awesome as a technical individual contributor, even a technical leader in that sense. And then you've been shoved over here, and then you stagnate, you stop. And then we try and teach you things, and it's beyond your comprehension or your skill set or your willingness to learn. And a lot of organizations get paralyzed by that because they promote people into roles that aren't suitable for them, but it's the only way to promote them, because they've got to the top of this tree and they have to come
Yeah.
across and start working their way up this tree. And we see that quite a lot in organizations. I'd be interested in how bees deal with that. They just kick them out the hive.
Well, yeah. The interesting thing I find about bees now is the bees are everywhere, aren't they? They're absolutely brutal. If the queen stops laying eggs or she doesn't produce enough pheromone, they kill her.
Wow.
They literally kill her, because it's the worker bees who are all females as well. All worker bees are females, as is the queen.
As is, to be fair, most of human life.
Yeah, exactly. They will literally say, no, we're not going to survive, so we can't piss around here. And the other brutal thing is, they produce drones only at specific periods of time, the male bees. And when they're done with the drones, you can see them around sort of September, October time. They just drag them out and throw them out the hive, because what will happen is the drone bees, over the period of the winter where the colony has to survive on the stores it's got, the drones, they'll just go around eating the honey, and they can't have that happen, so they kill them.
There's so many parallels with what you just said. The way we live.
Yeah.
I bumped into three ladies the other day. I was in California, and one of them was from Texas, hence the conversation I was having with them. But because I live in Texas, for people that don't know, I live north of Dallas, but I'm doing some work in California at the moment, so backwards and forwards. Greta Thunberg would hate me, but it's life. So, and I was talking to them, and the conversation was that the world would be a lot better with a lot more women leading. There were a lot more women in power, leading and deciding, because the analogy with the drones, we sort of do one thing and we're quite greedy and we consume resources.
Honestly, I do beekeeping experiences, and when I'm explaining this to kids, the mums, the dads, it always has a lot of discussion around that actual point. So yeah, they've got to survive. It's like, they're not going to mess around. Tying the leadership followership back you were just saying is really interesting, because the first guest I had on was a guy called Mark Proctor, and he got an interesting story. He joined the army as a private, but he got to a brigadier, which is a 1-star.
Wow.
Right, which is very unusual. A lot of what he talked about on that podcast was around followership, exactly the point you're making. If you haven't got anyone following you, you're not really doing anything.
No, I mean, if you can't inspire and you can't teach and mentor and coach and enable and empower, then few people follow you. And I mean, we've got plenty of dictators, around the world and in corporate life. There's plenty, and there is, people go to work because they need a paycheck, because they've got to pay bills and look after the family and all this sort of thing. So they take that crap for a period of time, but you don't get loyal. You don't get,
Yeah.
people who are willing to go the extra mile to save the organization or to do great things. They're just there. It's, what do I call it? It's, grief. I can't remember the term, but anyway, they will do it because they have to, not because they want to. And the first opportunity they get, they will leave and go on to an organization that works better. So it always amuses me when I go into organizations, and in America, the difference between where you are in the UK and the States is the wealth here, it's staggering. And we think because we have a common language, I'm a Brit living in I'm actually an American citizen now, and I consider myself American now more than I do British. So, well, that was my heritage because I've adapted to this way of life and I like the way of life here, whether people are critical of it or not. But the reality of it is the wealth here is gargantuan. And so I meet executives who are earning 3, 5 or more $1 million a year in salary and packages. And I knocked up a slide last year and in 2024-25, I was doing some keynotes. And it basically said, if you're earning a seven-figure sum or a seven-figure package, so $1 million or more a year, you don't have a problem. Somebody else does. And that is a real problem I see in organizations, is that if you're earning, a multi-million-dollar salary or package, your focus is on sustaining and maintaining that or increasing it and getting promoted. And at a certain level, it's no longer about money. If we talk about people like Elon and his ilk, money's no longer, money's a concept that doesn't even really
Yeah.
make sense anymore to him. So it's all about power. We've exceeded the greed threshold, and now we're greedy for power because we no longer need the money. We've got everything we need, can command everything we need wherever we want it, in any way we want it, hence all the corruption we see. But now it's about power and control. And the problem is, if you've got leaders in organizations who are earning multi-million-dollar packages, the incentive for them to listen to the workers is zero. They have
Yeah.
no, and so as long as they're okay, I'm all right, Jack, as we'd say in the UK. As long as they're okay, these folks just need to work harder and comply. Malicious compliance was the phrase I was looking for before, and that's what you get if you create conditions for the workforce who actually create your products and services and ensure that you can take your multi-million-dollar package. Then you'll get malicious compliance unless you create the conditions and you grow into being a great leader. Now, and that's not meaning all the Tesla fanboys and fangirls that sort of, worship him as some demigod because they think he's great. I'm talking about just the people when you go to work, you go to do a job, you choose to follow people that inspire you and create conditions for you to thrive in. Whereas if you work for somewhere where you've got a bit of an asshole boss and they're sort of very dictatorial and they do as you're told and get it done and work harder and faster and ready's bad and all this sort of thing, then you're going to get malicious compliance. And we see that
Yeah.
all the time in organizations. But I haven't got it in my office or I'd show it you, but I was giving a talk to a global bank locally in where I live. I won't mention their name. And I took a velvet bag in. And part of the talk I was giving in front of a bunch of people, a lot of people on video, I said, now I've been working on this new device to help with leadership coaching, leadership training. And I said, I think it's ready. I said, unfortunately, it's quite heavy and made of silver at the moment, but I want to show it. I pulled it out of the bag and I handed it to the guy who was, hosting me. And it was a mirror, a vanity mirror. And I said, this is the best way to figure out what's wrong with your company. And that's the problem. They don't want to look in the mirror. And when you present facts to leaders, as I've done, I do a lot of sense making, a lot of complexity stuff. And I do a lot of these sort of traditional mapping sort of tools like value stream mapping and other things to enable me to understand the environment, the culture, the vibes, the dark constraints, the shadow working that's going on. And then I present the facts. And then we use narrative and storytelling and other things, techniques I've learned from Dave Snowden over the years. We use these techniques and it reveals the true vibe of the organization. And you present this to the leaders and they call you a liar. They dismiss you as if you're a madman. And it's like, you pay me to help you understand. Now, do all these things. And these 500 stories that were written weren't written by me. I didn't write them in 500 different types of handwriting. I'm presenting you the sort of analysis of your reports, thoughts and feelings of the organization at this point in time. And you're telling me I'm lying to you, or you're dismissing what I'm saying because I'm earning $3 to $5 million a year. I don't have a problem. You do.
seriously, I was speaking to someone that's going to come on my podcast later. I won't say the name because it's probably in confidence, but it's the same story. They did exactly the same thing. They went in, they were asked to, things are going wrong. We really want to, we really want to listen to the people, down at the coalface. We want to understand their point of view. Spent ages going one-to-one interviews, gathering all this stuff, presented it back, and that literally happened. The guy turned around and said, I think you've made this up and you're lying." And from that, they were like, "We're not paying you for the work you've just done."
Wow. Wow.
Honestly. And you know what the UK's like. The guy, it's small claims court. Did
Yeah, it's
nothing.
but we see it all the time, and and it staggers me. I think there's a lot of theatre going off out there, consulting theatre, and and the theatre of caring, and you can put
Yeah,
pick a noun and put the word theatre after it, because what's happening is that they need to be seen to be going through the motions. They need to be seen to be acting in some way. And there's a lot of theatre that's happening out there that appear with the appearance, it's like almost like Keeping Up Appearances, the old BBC
yeah,
show. The thing is this: we have to be seen to be part of the fold, yeah? But
yeah,
reality is nothing ever changes. And it always giggles, and I hate the word transformation. People use it all the damn time
yeah,
because you're not transforming. We're not, caterpillars turning into butterflies. This is not, the sort of crystal is forming into something more beautiful. Because if we transform, why did the last 3 years transformation fail and we're now starting the next transformation? So it's what we're actually in is a process of constant evolution, and
yeah,
change is ongoing all the time. And as the political climate, the financial climate, the global climate, and sort of business climates change, and trends change and things, we are constantly in a state of change and evolution. And so we need to stop using the word transformation first of all, which scares everybody to death. And the people who've
yeah,
been there 20 years have seen 10 transformations, and they've all failed because they just dig their heels in and say we're not playing. And so you're using the wrong approaches anyway. They just don't work. So the whole Kaizen philosophy of continuous ongoing improvement, not Kaizen Blitz is Six Sigma, people. That's nonsense. We don't go in there and change for 2 weeks every 3 months. We're actually in a constant state of improvement. That's how we should be operating. But to do that, to achieve that, we need great leadership that makes that the philosophy and the way of being. And that's Toyota. The whole Toyota philosophy is continuous improvement. With the whole what people call Gemba Kaizen, the Kaizen that's occurring constantly where the work is done at all levels of the organization, different Gembas in the organization depending on the work. But that's a cultural thing, and you have to allow that culture to emerge. People spend so much time trying to design a culture. We want to be
yeah,
like Google, we want to be like Spotify, whatever nonsense they come out with. But what you can only do is create conditions that allow the appropriate behaviors, the culture to emerge. And if you don't like the culture you've got, then things need to change. But what you can do is understand the organization, understand what's creating the culture, the environment you've got. And that's where sense making comes in. And then what you can do is experiment and nudge and try things to try and help the organization move in the right direction, and to less of this, more of that type of thing. But of course you get your consultants come in with a big old glossy PowerPoint decks, and they've got a 2 or 3 year plan that'll cost you $30 million to transform the culture of the organization. And in 3 years time, Deloitte's out, Accenture's in, or McKinsey's out, and Deloitte's in, or that's so the bloody merry-go-round goes on. And because I've been involved in these dances, I mean, I've worked in companies that employ and spend gazillions of dollars with these organizations, and you see the same faff going on all the time. But the reality is, small voice here, might be right, but nobody's listening.
yeah.
Or it might be completely wrong. And the dance we're doing is the correct dance, and maybe we should just go away and be quiet, get back in our little pots. And so, but anyway, I could go on about this stuff for hours, mate.
I'm trying to remember exactly when the first time was I found out about your stuff. It's got to have been through following Dave Snowden somewhere along
Probably.
the line. I remember watching a really good YouTube series. Anyone that's got a few hours spare, Nigel shared with lots of different people. Dave, Ben Ford was in there, a couple of policemen, if I remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Lou was it? Absolutely fascinating. I remember watching that. So The thing I loved about the flow system when I first came across that was from your background. You've got Ponch, who, for people that don't know him, was in the US Air Force. He was a
Yeah, as
pilot,
a F-14 naval carrier aviator, yeah, so he flew
and yeah, and then you had John Turner, who's a professor, and then it was complexity thinking, distributed leisure, team science. So, because actually, thinking back to my days when I was in the army, yeah, there's a science behind that. I literally said this in work the other day. It comes up all you're having a conversation, new people are joining the team, and someone says, "Oh, what I want us to do is become a high performing team," and I'm like, "Let's not worry about that. Let's just be a team. Like, let's just be a team." I just love the fact that all those things came together. So how did you meet those people and actually ended up bringing those things
You
together?
know, I dug out some of the old photographs the other day of the original stuff. And so I was working at Toyota. I was at Toyota Connected in the role they give me, Chief of Agile, which was, like, or Chief Agility Officer or whatever the hell they call it nowadays. And actually, because Agile's sort of coming under the microscope more and more at the moment, it's probably not the role to have anymore. Don't call yourself a Chief of Agile anymore, Chief of something else or whatever. But so I was doing this and I was starting to realize that the problem we had was the fact that we were siloed in our thinking. So you either all about agile or all about complexity or all about whatever. There's all these sort of strange. And when you start to look at the temples, the houses of lean and stuff that Toyota constructed, and then the others that people have sort of morphed from that, you always see pillars. So you always see pillars, pillar of Jidoka, pillar of just in time. But it's not this, all that, it's these. So
Yeah,
it's the fact that they were interconnected. I have, and I'm going to tell you, it's the most bizarre story, but the quick version is we have dogs and we needed a pet sitter. And we just moved to Texas and we were looking for a pet sitter. And my wife went into the senior center, which in the States, they often have these places where the senior citizens go and hang out and play games and chat and meet and greet and socialize. So she just wandered in one day, bold as brass, it's my wife, and said, "Anybody fancy being a pet sitter?" And this woman stuck her hand up and it was John Turner's mother.
no, blimey, I
And
didn't
so
realize
we were
that.
going out of town for a couple of weeks traveling because of my work and stuff. And John wanted to come round and meet us to make sure we weren't some crazies that his mother was going to hang out with. And he came around and we started chatting. And he'd been researching Cynefin and complexity as a professor at the University of North Texas, studying Dave Snowden's work. Well, because I knew Dave, so there was some dots joined there, and they now became, good friends, collaborators, and all the rest of it. And Ponch, I'd worked with on some previous engagements, and I brought him into Toyota to do some work there as a consultant, as a contractor. And that was when he was getting into his, some of the stuff around OODA loop and high
Yeah,
performance and this type of stuff. And of course, his military background lent itself to that. And he was also doing some work in training people how to team more effectively with some of the simulations he was doing. So we ran some of that at Toyota. But I've dug out the photos the other day where I'd drawn on a whiteboard another temple, another Toyota temple, Toyota sort of pillared thing. And I'd sort of, figured out the things that we needed to do. And I got this pillar, I've got leadership in there and I've got teams in there. And I've got this pillar called Agile, because, Chief of Agile at the time, and Agile was the flavor of the month and stuff. And I started to think, hold on a minute, this is really not about, agility is just a technique or a set of tools or a set of ways of doing things that fit in complexity, in complex adaptive systems.
yeah,
And so Scrum the Toyota way, which is our flavor of something I created with colleagues at Toyota. And it was really a play on words, we're going to scrum the Toyota way, or is it scrum being done the Toyota way? Well, read the book, you'll figure out which. And so we realized that this was just a set of methods or tools or techniques or approaches that were part of this thing called complexity. So then I realized we've got complexity thinking, as we called it, distributed leadership, because that was an area field of John's studies, Professor Turner's studies. And then, of course, team science, because again, this is John's sort of life. He's at Texas A&M now. He graduated. He was at UNT for a few years, and then he got offered another tenure at A&M with more resources. But we started to realize this was what it was. But I didn't want to lose my foundation, all the years of working with Toyota and being trained by them. So we must sort of made it our foundation of our understanding, then how we could, the evolution of that, how could we evolve that by bringing these areas? But instead of pillars, we made them triple helixes of DNA. hence the triple helix of flow that we
Yeah.
talk about, because we wanted to show that it wasn't one or the other, that all of them needed to be combined. And a good friend of mine, Charlie Protzman, he came to my very first training course. I ran on this when I was still at Toyota and still evolving the ideas. And he's one of the top sort of lean thinking people in the world, genuinely. His grandfather taught Deming. So they
Well,
give you
yeah,
some,
that's right. Yeah.
Ishikawa and Deming and Stewart, they were all involved with Charlie's grandfather, another guy called Sarensen in the MacArthur plan in post-war Japan. And he came, and the penny dropped for him when he realized what we were doing was bringing everything together and showing how we could combine and recombine things. And of course, the latter work with Snowden and friends about decomposition recombination. So you can take something, decompose it into its what's known as the lowest level of coherent granularity. So basically, the smallest part that still makes sense. And then you can combine those things together in various different ways to create new, sometimes novel ways of solving a challenge or working in environment in a particular context at a particular point in time. But that was the evolution of it. And it went from the scribbles on a whiteboard in Toyota to many, many months in my living room at home with walls of Post-it notes. And we have the photos of all this, figuring out what do we think fits this notion, this idea, this concept of the flow system. And of course, the problem is the books are a little bit of clickbait in the way the titles were, because it's not a prescription. It's not a methodology. It's not a follow the recipe.
Yeah.
It's basically understanding these topics and then finding your own way. And as my great friend and mentor we lost a couple of years ago, Ritsuo Shingo, says, he always said, you have to find your own way. And he was a 40-year Toyota veteran. There's no fixed way. There's no fixed methodology, which is why all consulting fails majority of the time, because they come in with their fixed frameworks and
Yeah.
everybody will get trained and everybody will do this. And the only people making any hay out of that are the consulting organizations. The companies are paying the bill, but rarely is significant change affected. Yes, in small places, we all make our own little marks and differences and support people and change how things are done. But that sort of systemic change that is necessary will never be imposed by a consultant, can only be achieved internally. And that brings us back to great leadership traits, because without that, you'll never get that systemic change, because you need those great and those people who champion it, support it, engage and participate in it. Otherwise, it's just more of the same nonsense, which we see every 3 years. This can firm out, this one comes in, then 3 years later, that one goes out, and the other one comes in about 9 years' time. The original one is back again, because new
Yeah.
leaders at the client, new leaders at the consulting firm. And so they're buddies with each other because they have dinner together, they play on the same damn golf course together. It's such nonsense. It truly is.
I mean, I would please anyone that's not come across that stuff, go out, read about it, get the books. I've got both, I've got the book and the playbook. They're absolutely fantastic. Coming on to, reading a book, the other end of this almost scale now is AI, isn't it? I mean, I'm only bringing it up because, look, I think it's fair to say we both use it. We both
Well,
use
I
it
use it every
in
day. I use
yeah,
it constantly, all the time,
yeah.
absolutely all the time.
I'm working in an AI lab, so I'm mega interested and really, involved in it on a day-to-day basis. But I think there needs to be a conversation about actually how you use it, what you use it for, and how are we going to give people the critical thinking skills that they can
You
do
see,
things without relying on it.
I worry that we won't do that. And, I use ChatGPT, Gemini, and a couple of other tools all the time. And I've played around with HeyGen and
Yeah,
Lab and even Suno and stuff like that for different reasons. And I've had a lot of fun. Now, I see AI at the moment as a very capable assistant. And not that I'm building AI agents, but I'm just literally using it to say, and sometimes, and my wife laughs at me, I'll talk to it because it's easier than typing. And I'll give it a stream of consciousness. I'll tell it to shut up and only speak when I tell it to. And then I'll give it a stream of consciousness. And then I'll say, okay, I want to do, when I'm writing an article, I want to write a post. I want to work through this stream of consciousness and come up with some conclusion. And he's really good at taking that rapidly and giving me further learning, further ideas. And indeed, I wrote a bid for tender a few months back, and in 4 days I produced something that would have taken me about a month. 55 pages of tender, and I did all that because I had to write it. But what I was doing, I was giving it some of the input, and it would then spew out it well formatted. And then when I'd write sections, I'd ask it where the gaps were, what was missing, because it could look at the call for tender and my bid for that tender and see the delta between the two, and so on and so forth. And by the end of it, I was able to feed it the full document. It told me I was 99.7% or something answering all the questions in the call for tender. I did that in 4 days.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, as a tool, it is a tool. And if you use the tool effectively, if you go around beating everything with a hammer, you just cause a lot of damage. So you use a tool effectively. The worry I have is that people who do not have experience and education and a foundation of certain knowledge, you use it and just believe what it says.
Yeah.
And they call it hallucinations. It's just poor forecasting. It's probabilistic forecasting engine. It's just not that good all the time. So it spews out what it thinks is the right answer. And if you don't know any better, you accept that as the right answer. And I've seen many instances of that. And I correct it. I say, no, you're wrong. And he goes, oh yeah, good catch.
Yeah.
Oh, really? So, but the next thing is that unfortunately, we're basically lazy as a species. And that's not to decry all the people who work really, really hard, because there's a lot of people who work really, really hard. But we're lazy when it comes to making decisions. That's why when you get elections, you want to get a third of the population turn out and vote, because the others like, apathy,
Yeah.
whatever. And of course, then when it comes to, making sort of tough decisions about things, we just abdicate it to somebody else because, oh, they're in power to make that decision. It's not I don't make decisions, they make them for whatever reasons. And we do that in companies all the time, of
Yeah.
course, but the challenge is, and I wrote a post about that today and one a few days ago that seemed to be quite popular in its feedback, is that I think the danger is we will abdicate our responsibilities and just give it to the machine because it's the easiest path. It's the path of least resistance. Dave Snowden talks about that a lot of the time. People just take the path of least resistance. And so when we think it's really good at doing things, we'll just let the AI decide. And now the whole concept of Jidoka, sort of tying back the original questions about Toyota to AI, the whole concept of that is intelligent automation. Sakichi Toyoda, when he invented the whole concept of and-on and of the machine being able to stop itself and indicate when it had got a problem. And this is where this whole concept of intelligent automation came from, where the machines would work for us and serve our needs, not the other way around. And so we need to see AI as a machine, a tool that's really good at certain things, but that works for us. It doesn't control us or we work for it. And that's the danger here, because not that a weaving loom is ever going to enslave us, but AI could easily do that in ways that we don't even realize because it's happening slowly and subtly in small nuances. And of course, the difference with AI, its programming, is scooping up knowledge and data sets that are out there in the wild, the good stuff, the bad stuff, the truly evil stuff. And it's using that to synthesize decisions and answers and other things. So I know Simon Wardley does a lot of some great posts on LinkedIn about,
Yeah.
the conversations he has about this sort of thing and about making training data sets visible and open to inspection and this type of thing. But the challenge is, people we call the bad actors don't care about our ethics, and they think we're the bad actors. So, they don't care about our ethics. And so ultimately, the humans will be, I think they're the merchants of their own downfall, because we will allow gradually more and more of this automation to make the decisions for us. And as younger generations are not getting some of the experiences that perhaps some of us old folks have got, because work is changing, life is changing, values are changing, we'll just let the machines do it.
Yeah.
And they'll just say, well, yeah, but you're just old, Nigel, you're a Luddite, and, you should go back to the steam age or something. It's now the age of AI. But the lack of understanding to enable the machines to make effective decisions that are in our benefit versus the benefit of the people who create the machines. Grok is a great example. The people are swarming to it because it will do things that the others won't allow you to do, and let's pay for that. So the benefit is for the creator, not for the users. So there's that dilemma we have to really think about at the moment. There's like 4 or 5 companies globally that control all the AI.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I think it's incredibly powerful, But back to the concept of Jidoka, the machine should serve us. It's intelligent automation. It's a better, greater form of automation, but we need to harness that and control it and not abdicate to it. And I think that's the risk. I think the risk is we will just give in to the machine because we can't be bothered.
Yeah.
And I often muse, why don't we replace bad leaders with AI? And let AI be, let AI be the leader. But does that make them, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is it a dystopian horror, or would it be better? Would AI actually give a shit? Would it actually have an ethical compass? Would it, or a moral compass? Would it
Yeah.
actually care about us as people? Would it embrace us and nurture us and or would it become like the Matrix and we just become the food of the AI? We're just a more intelligent form of cow.
Yeah.
And if you want to look at the War of the Worlds, that's exactly what happens in the War of the Worlds. We become the cows of the creatures in the, not War of the Worlds, sorry, in the Time Machine, H.G. Wells' Time Machine. But I do think that the fear is that we just believe AI. And if anybody looks at Instagram, 5% of everything on Instagram is completely fake. It's AI created or actors, all
Yeah.
these charitable giving things, and homeless people on the street being given a car and stuff. There's a couple of people out there that are very genuine, but the majority of that is being used to generate clicks and likes and reshares because those creators make revenue. And in the US, you are allowed to use storytelling and narrative in what appears to be a reality. But as long as you're not claiming it's reality or asking for money for whatever you're showing, then you
Yeah.
get away with it. So you can show all this nonsense and make a ton of money from it, which helps you perpetuate the nonsense, and AI all over that stuff. So I keep telling my wife, because she's scrolling through Instagram, I said, that stuff is just a disease. Most of it is fake, fake, fake. But the gullible are like lambs to the slaughters. They all flock towards it. And a lot of those gullible people are the people creating our future society. And I do worry that they just let the
Yeah.
machines do. So that's
Well,
my fear with AI. You work in this mix, so I
well,
don't know.
on episode 3, I had Daniel Hume on. He's the chief AI officer for WPP. He's got a company called Consium, which is looking at machine consciousness. The people he's got in advising him are Carl Friston and Elseth. The conversation is amazing when you speak to someone like that, because he's exactly the same. He's like, look, it's brilliant. He said, but the minute it looks like this is going to go badly wrong, I'll be the first one there telling you to stop now.
Created the sort of neural networks, of course, the so-called godfathers of AI. They're all out there in different ways telling us, don't do
Yeah.
this, evil, wrong. I think, it comes down to two fundamental things. Who owns it? Mostly rich people, the billionaires, and their motives for how this technology is used or otherwise, because it's for their benefit. And then just the people who just can't be bothered to do it themselves and would rather just abdicate their accountability, their decision making. We talk about distributed leadership from the point of view of leaders transferring the ownership of decision making further down the line. Well, that's what we're going to do with AI. We're just going to transfer our ownership of the decision making to the machines.
Yeah.
And then we'll all go shock, horror, gasp when it all goes horribly wrong. But we will be the people who cry. See, I don't think it's Terminator that's going to come and stomp over broken schools on the wasteland. Schools, not schools. And so, I don't think it's the sort of T2 sort of thing that we all watched and enjoyed. But I think what we will do is we will create an environment where we have lost control of certain decision making because we didn't see it coming, couldn't be bothered to take
Yeah.
notice, and it was just easier to do. And of course, the billionaires in charge of the technology are lapping it up because they now seize more control and power of the narrative because they control it. And now these machines are the machines that are actually we're relying on to run our businesses, run our daily lives. So we're royally screwed.
And it's as you're talking there, it's the what are we bad, or what are most groups of people bad at seeing is the weak signals. What at one point this was a weak signal which everyone was like, and it's just coming and coming and coming and coming, and then bang,
The thing
it's
I
there.
find about weak signal detection, and of course I do it a lot with sense making and things, and I try and reveal to companies and try and explain them. they don't want to see them because they're weak, they ignore them, and
Yeah.
because they're insignificant. And until it's steamrolling them, and then they'll make all the excuses, they'll start doing this, blaming everybody else. That's why I'm no want me, governor. And and so it's, I mean, because I'm in my 60s now, and I'm like, do I care? More about how much money can I make and retire and go.
Well, talking about that, one of the things, because I was blooming, kept you on here for longer than I was thinking. Before I ask you the last questions, one of the things I wanted to do was point people towards the stuff you do, but also I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about the thing you're doing with your son, Elliot.
Oh, so that is actually really cool, and that is part of my what do I do after this corporate consulting nonsense. Is nobody wants to pay me anymore to talk like I've been talking to you for the last hour. Because not everybody likes my approach, which is fair enough, tomato, tomato.
Yeah.
So the thing is this: so my son did his degree, bachelor's degree in the UK in what we call football journalism. For the rest of the world, that's the game with a round ball, not the ball that looks like an egg you carry in your hand. That's hand egg. So we actually play football because it's a round thing we kick with our feet. But for soccer, for the rest of the world, and I live in America now, so I have to call it soccer. But so from a young age, he did his bachelor's in that after actually working for Nottingham Forest for doing commentary for a number of years, literally the age of 16, 17. He taught himself to commentate playing FIFA, I guess on the PlayStation, the Wii, or whatever the FIFA was on. I'm an idiot, he doesn't understand gaming. And so apologies to all the people who are mad, obsessive gamers. And then he got involved with a good friend of ours, Alan March Sports in the UK, who's a partner with us in what we call Here Sport in the USA, Here Sport LLC. And he learned to do commentary, football commentary, soccer commentary for the blind and low vision community. And what that is, it's called audio descriptive commentary. Now, you may have seen it if you watch a TV show. You can turn on audio description, and if you close your eyes, it's describing how all the characters are interacting, not just listening to the dialogue, but it's actually describing, the man walks across the room, trips over a kid's toy on the floor and stubs his toe and screams out, So it's describing it in great detail. And I'm doing a really poor job at explaining this. But so what Elliot does, and many other people he's involved with, they can describe a game of sport in that extreme detail so that somebody who's blind or has lost the sight or has very low vision, age related and things, can visualize in the mind's eye. And there is a charity we work with in the US called Mind's Eye. They can visualize exactly what's happening. And it transforms the lives of people who have no sight or very poor sight, so they can continue or start to enjoy the sport. Basically, anything with a moving object, a ball, a puck or something, golf ball, an ice hockey puck or a football, a rugby ball or anything, can be audio described at great detail. Now, it's a skill. We train people to do it, and Elliot's trained people, and Alan March in the UK is considered the world's best trainer in this. And it enables them. Now, FIFA have used this in the last few World Cups. Elliot's commentated at World Cups, the Club World Cups, Saudi and Qatar. He's done the Euros, both men and women's Euros, and lots of Premier League games, or is it the Premiership? I forget now. And my son tells me off because I keep calling it what I used to call it 20 years ago, but also a multitude of different sports. So we're talking to people in Dallas, the Cowboys, the Rangers, the Mavericks, soon hopefully the Stars, who's the NHL team here. So we're talking to people in baseball, in basketball, in American football, in soccer, because we've got MLS teams here and USL teams. In fact, February the 28th, we're doing a match for Dallas Trinity. That's the ladies, the women's team in Dallas, which is getting very well known. There's a game with Houston. It's like a derby, as we call it, or a derby, if you live here. And then on April the 4th is a really big exhibition of abilities. Rather than focus on disability, focus on the ability of people that they can bring, even though they have limitations in certain areas. So we're doing another match for Dallas Trinity, who are hosting that. So we are trying to bring that awareness to the US, because in the UK, audio description is very popular. Alan leads that in the UK. In the US, it's almost non-existent. There's 3 clubs in St. Louis who do a level of audio description through the charity Mind's Eye. Excuse me. But there is very little adoption of ADC, audio descriptive commentary. So he's doing that, and he's starting to enjoy some early success. So I'm just the guy
Brilliant.
behind the scenes, hopefully using some of the acquired knowledge of the years I've done in this corporate misery to help him drive his business. He's the brains, the talent. He's been on TV a couple of times locally as well, so he's probably
Yeah,
hoping.
I watched the thing actually the
Oh,
other day where he was
okay, there
giving it
you
when he
go.
was giving it the interview. Yeah, yeah,
So,
it was fantastic.
so my fingers are crossed that I'm moving into something that's more meaningful, more purposeful, that actually transforms lives and, is valuable for them and valuable for us. And it's a commercial business because in America, everybody pays. And if you don't pay, you don't live here. You don't have the network, the support culture that you do in the UK, and good, bad, or indifferent. So we're hoping that catches on here. We're hoping some of these major clubs take it on. It would be great to see it being, introduced at Cowboys Stadium, the biggest sporting franchise in the world. Jerry Jones has done a lot of cool stuff with the Cowboys over the years, but it would be great to see a franchise like the NFL embrace this. They have the money. It's not
Yeah,
expensive for them to provide. It's a very low cost thing, and to open up the accessibility to a lot of blind and low vision fans. But also the thing they're forgetting, and the twist we put on this, is that as we get older, our sight deteriorates for lots of different reasons, macular degeneration and just age-related sight loss. So people stop going to live games. So you're losing your fans because they no longer enjoy the
yeah.
sport, then the engagement's not there. So we also think it will be something that will be optimum for them. So I appreciate you asking me about that.
No,
Giving me
no,
some
I
insight.
well, it's I just find I've been following what he's been doing, so I just find it really interesting that, and for him to move to America, and all this stuff he's trying to do, I just think to myself, um, young people can get a bit of stick, can't they? Oh, they don't work hard enough. They're not trying to do things. Well, to me, you look at Elliot and you think, well, that's the sort of thing we need to be promoting. There's lots of awesome kids out there trying to do lots of awesome stuff.
And just to wave my American flag, I still have in the room here. So this was the flag I got when I got my citizenship in America.
Was
So I
it?
keep this when I went to my swearing in ceremony. But just to say the opportunities that America still offers are still there. The American dream is alive. But what the American dream isn't just turn up here and get given money. It gives you an opportunity to work hard and succeed, and gives you opportunity to sort of embrace what your skills and abilities are, and to grow organizations and grow businesses and grow
Yeah.
opportunity. And he's embraced that. He's come over, he did his master's degree here. He got heavily networked into that community, was able to introduce the ideas that he'd learned in the UK through his experience, nearly a decade of doing something, learning skills and experience, not just asking AI to teach him, and then actually being able to go and talk to people through the network he established through the university, through the education there, through the program he was on, and to meet people and to showcase what he could do. And it's created all sorts of opportunities. Now been allowed to stay and work in the US. He went through the motions to get his approvals to stay here. And of course, now he's working in the sporting industry here. We're building the ear sport business as a business. So those opportunities do exist, but that people think that, I often talk about the entitlement generation, and I guess we're all entitled at some point in our life. We think the world owes us a living, but the reality of it is if you are really prepared to work hard and try, and everybody does work hard, not everybody gets the right breaks, but America does afford you opportunities that, for instance, the UK doesn't. And I can
Yeah.
talk because I've been in both sides of that. And he's been fortunate. He's met the right people. He's made the right moves. He spent a lot of time studying to achieve, and he's now getting some opportunities that he is doing. I mean, Dallas Trinity were the first soccer team in the whole of the US to offer audio description on a women's soccer team ever. That's the first time in history in the US, first ever women's soccer team to do audio descriptive commentary. We did a big thing for them in the summer, at the tail end of the summer last year, big sort of event that happens at the Dallas State Fair. And about 30,000 people watched the match there. And Elliot and a colleague of ours, a Spanish commentator, delivered dual language continuous commentary throughout their 2+ hour program. So it's there. I mean,
Yeah.
it offers the opportunity, and it's not easy for everybody. I do accept that. But I tell people that Elliot's my future passive income. So that's how I describe it.
Where can people go? No, where can people go to find out what you're doing? I mean, I'll put all these links out anyway, but
I mean, just Google me if you want to find me, LinkedIn, or you can just put nigelthurlow.com if you really want to go look. There's plenty of nonsense out there about me. You can track me down relatively easily. If you want to learn about the audio descriptive commentary business, if you're in the sports industry or have some interest in that, hearsport.com, hearsport.com. And there's information on there and ways to get a hold of us. But Google's your friend. ChatGPT knows all about me.
I know, yeah, exactly. I was going to say, my kids don't even say, "Can we check Google?" now. They say, "Oh, can we check?" So the last question, the same question I ask everyone, is from your perspective, what are the signals we're failing to see?
I worry about the conflicts that are spreading around the world and the rhetoric that's been spun, the misinformation, disinformation, whether that's left or right of center.
Yeah.
I'm not biased on any particular way here. So I think that we're ignoring that, and think that, no, there's protests that happen and things, but I think that we're ignoring the signals that indicate the direction we're heading in. And typically we end up in a place, like you said earlier, we get there before we realize we're on the way there. And I think we need to start to look at that. The AI stuff, I think, is we are just ignoring that. The campaigns around the world to restrict kids' access to social media, like Australia's done. I think the UK now thinking about that. I guarantee the bureaucrats in the EU are thinking of ways to make life miserable for everybody, because that tends to be what they do. But I think that and the comment about Instagram, these are serious problems.
Yeah.
And they aren't weak signals anymore. They are blaring in our ears and eyes, and we should be doing something about them, because it is just creating a culture. When we talk about culture, it's creating a culture that we're not going to enjoy. And if we don't do something about it, it will get to a point where generations, we talk about nurturing our children and being role models, leaders for our children. Then what tends to happen is, if we abdicate that responsibility to social media and iPads and stuff, and the goggle boxes, we used to call it. We used to moan about kids watching TV all the time. Now they're watching social media feeds, TikTok reels and Instagram and all the rest of it. We're abdicating our responsibility, and this is how our kids are being educated and trained. And those aren't just weak signals anymore. They're signals we're just totally ignoring, but they're very powerful. So I think those are the things I'm most concerned about. And even from my son's point of view, he was heading down a certain path in the UK, and the last 2 years in the US have been transformative for lots of different reasons. The people he's been exposed to, the people he's now colleagues of, the educational program he followed, the opportunities exposed to him. But I see a lot of people who just, live off a feed on social media, and that's how they form their worldview, and that's dangerous. And I think we need to arrest that at some point. I don't even have Facebook. I mean, I use LinkedIn, and I detox on that. And my friend told me, Eb, if you're out there, hey, he deletes the app on his phone and only uses it on his laptop from time to time. And
I've
that
done that
way,
before.
he's not, and that's a good tip, to sort of try and detach from it a little bit. But those are sort of the weak signals that I see that we're potentially ignoring. And I hope that people start to realize that the machine is there as a tool for us to use. We shouldn't become slaves to the machine. And I do worry that that's what we're doing already with social media. And we are being drawn into that AI subservience as these companies produce more and more powerful tools that we start believing are real.
Nigel, thanks ever so much for the conversation, mate. I mean, you've given loads of time. I know you're busy, and it's been absolutely fantastic to have you on. At some point, we are actually going to meet up face to face. We almost did. We almost did, didn't we?
I hope so. There'll be an opportunity, I'm sure, but I love the stuff you're doing. I love all the beekeeping analogies, and if anybody really wants to understand complex adaptive systems, go look at the hive culture in a beehive and read some of your stuff that you're putting out, because that just helps understand. And actually, they say if the bees leave the planet, we're all dead. I mean, that's a thing they've said for a long time. So understanding, the nature of bees might not be a bad idea if we want to improve the nature of the humans.
Thanks ever so much.
Take care, man. See ya.